So, welcome to today's session here on Agentless Antivirus here at VMware, the greatest virtualization show on the planet. It's always good to start off with some hyperbole there, so I like to do that. Thanks. And I want to let everyone kind of inform you that if you look at the title and it says Agentless Antivirus with Seraph, and you see Trend Micro there, we're not trying to compete with VMware and coming out with a different set of APIs, different from vShield Endpoint. No. Seraph is indeed very much the same thing. It's the project name for vShield Endpoint. And this submission for this presentation was done well before the vShield Endpoint name was branded. So I didn't want to put the right name in here and have people look at the agenda and say, am I in the right place, right talk here? So we left it as it is, but it is very much the same session. And another clarification point, someone came up to the booth and asked me, actually two people did this morning, saying, we heard yesterday I did another session with a customer on this technology. It was more briefly covered because it was a case study, but we introduced this in that session. So people heard about what Trend Micro has to offer here, and they also went to Marios's session, which is a VMware session on vShield Endpoint. And they were, again, are these different solutions here? Are you guys trying to essentially present two different competing solutions? Again, the answer is no. vShield Endpoint is the technology that we're leveraging, that VMware is providing. That's the engine, the platform really, that allows Trend Micro to build its security solutions and enable agentless security on top of that platform. So the two solutions are both essential and are part of this total value proposition that we offer together. So just wanted to make sure that, clear the air on that if there was any confusion for anyone. So I'm Harish Agastya. I'm with Trend Micro. I'm Director of Data Center Security there. We've been investing heavily in the virtualization and cloud security space for the last 3-4 years. And over the years, we've let me get my clicker here working. We've tried to further the envelope in terms of securing virtual and cloud environments. This is one extension of that total story. And as we go over this, I will make sure to present the overall picture in terms of virtual environments and the security challenges therein, and how what are some of the best practices that you can employ, regardless of whether you use Trend or not, in terms of securing that type of environment. So today's presentation is going to look at two key trends, not to overload the word trend here, but two key trends in the data center space, right? One is the change in the overall IT environment as it relates to data center security, and that's the evolution of virtualization and cloud, and how organizations are really leveraging these key groundbreaking technologies to try and create cost efficiencies and business-changing benefits inside the IT organization. The second key trend we'll be talking about is how the threat environment has changed over time, and how that impacts data center security as well. And then once we go over that, then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of how we now have an opportunity to leverage new security paradigms, and within the context of that, we'll talk about vShield Endpoint and security solutions that can leverage that, and what's the power of that overall solution, right? And then I'll close a little bit with what Trend has to deliver uniquely in this particular space. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I like to talk about in the context of securing a virtual environment is the typical security posture that organizations choose to deploy when they're securing a virtual environment, which for most of you, I would imagine, and has always been true with most of the customers and prospects I've talked to, is a security solution that was transposed from the physical world in terms of securing that virtual environment. So I would think, if we did a show of hands, likely most of you are running something in terms of an AV-type agent in the VM, That's an agent-based solution, and that's probably just an AV type component, antivirus or anti-malware as it's more commonly referred to these days. And then something on the network, on the perimeter, like a firewall and an IDS IPS, right? I'd say that pretty much 95% of this audience is likely deployed that, maybe even higher, right? So I see a lot of heads nodding, and so it looks like I'm pretty consistent with that. So that's the model, right? That's how we secured our physical servers, our physical data center as we knew it. And so when everyone jumped onto the virtualization bandwagon and all the cost efficiencies that we realized from that, we pretty much deployed what was available to us. The security industry had pretty much that model, and so that was the model we had to live with, right? So what we are going to now go over in the next section is a quick discussion on what are the limitations of that type of approach. So before I start, I like to remind us, kind of bring everyone up to speed on the typical virtualization journey that VMware espouses, right? This is what VMware sees as the common journey that most customers go through as they virtualize. Stage one is where they're virtualizing their basic servers, their file servers, print servers, and web servers, what you would consider non-mission critical, and leveraging and realizing the cost efficiencies that come from hardware consolidation and operational benefits that come from that type of hardware consolidation, right? Stage one, most organizations are already past this point. Many organizations are still leveraging it and are in this stage today. Stage two is where organizations start going past that to more advanced, to virtualization of more advanced, more mission-critical servers. So tier one types of applications are all now starting to be virtualized. Your email exchange, maybe your database, and other applications that you would consider mission-critical in your enterprise. Those are all now starting to be virtualized. You're starting to possibly look at desktop virtualization as well at this point. And also you're likely now deployed fully more advanced technologies from VMware, like DRS, like fault tolerance, and so on, right? So that's stage two, and I think most of you that have gone past stage one are in stage two. So across the board, stage one and stage two are where we've seen from the conversations we've had a trend that organizations are in. And then and stage two, they're probably not fully leveraged stage two yet, but they've kind of begun in virtualizing some of the mission-critical apps. Stage three is where organizations get past that and now start leveraging what else is available to you in terms of private and public cloud deployments. And so if you look at it, in that typical journey from stage one to stage two to stage three, the benefits accrue, increasing benefits accrue. You get cost efficiencies in stage one, as I already described, from hardware consolidation. But as you move to stage two, you get even more cost efficiencies. But you're also starting to realize more quality of service improvements because you're starting to use advanced virtualization technologies like fault tolerance and high availability at that point. As you move to stage three, all of those benefits increase, but you also start getting faster business agility, right? So for organizations, and this is the curve that VMware paints in terms of the adoption rate where organizations they see typically lie. What we often see is that in that journey from left to right, where nirvana or the pot of gold is all the way on the right, many organizations find that they're unable to fully realize their virtualization investments and fully adopt virtualization and move from stage one to stage three, because security becomes an increasingly larger obstacle in that journey. And there are numerous types of challenges that they often have to face, starting with stage one, where you have issues like inter-VM attacks. And I'll elaborate on a few of these for everyone's benefit. We won't have time to go through everything. But there are things like inter-VM attacks or network blindness, really, that you have, new blind spots in your network, even if you're in stage one, but you can't see what's happening with a network perimeter-based device, security device, like an IDS IPS that's sitting on your perimeter, can't monitor, can't see what's happening between two VMs in terms of traffic. And as you start moving past that into stage two, other challenges start accruing. And then ultimately, when you're in stage 3 is where even more challenges start realizing. Things like multi-tenancy and data access become critical issues too. So that's the security obstacles that commonly add up. Now let's look at a few of these in a little bit more detail. This one I already alluded to, right? Inter-VM attacks or blind spots. When a perimeter-based device is sitting there outside the network looking in, it can't see what's happening between two VMs on the same machine. As a customer put it, there's a party going on inside my VM environment and I'm not invited. My security device is not invited. It's sitting outside, doesn't have any visibility. And this type of network visibility is not that it doesn't exist even in the physical world. It does, especially if you don't have perimeter-based security devices such as IDS-IPS that you can deploy within your different network segments, because if you don't have that, then you don't have that visibility there either. This is just adding to that problem, compounding it, and you have an opportunity to solve it now once we talk about the types of solutions that are out there. The second challenge is the instant on gap. Anytime a VM were to come on, either because it's a new VM that emerged, or maybe it was a VM that was dormant for long periods of time and just got reactivated, that security on that particular VM is not ready to go, right? And that's counter to some of the value propositions of virtualization, where you want quick, you want dynamic, you want the VM to be up and running, and you want it to be in a secure environment. But often what happens is, if it's a reactivated VM that was dormant for a very long period of time, its understanding, the agent on it was sleeping for that entire time. So when it wakes up, its understanding of what's good or bad is out of date. The patterns that reside within that particular agent are out of date. And so there's that window of opportunity when something that might be malicious comes in, but the agent on there simply doesn't know. Right? Another challenge is with new VMs. As soon as the VM comes on, the agent on there either is not already there and you need to provision an agent, or maybe the agent was part of the template and it came on with there, but you still need to go into your security console, configure it, and set up that particular VM to be ready to go. Right? So there is that window of opportunity when security, the instant a VM is not on, is not equipped. Security is not equipped to protect that VM. Another type of challenge, and this is one of the most commonly heard ones, because some of the security gaps, a lot of security folks or ops folks don't directly see, but from an operations perspective, you all are already seeing this, I imagine. Certainly on if not on servers, in your VDI deployments, right? A resource contention, or what is also known as AV storms, when you have concurrent full system scans all kick off at the same time, that tends to bog down the performance of the underlying host system and creates significant performance degradation. Why? Because all of the agents don't even realize that they're on a virtual environment, and then they happen to try and compete with each other. Why does that happen? Because these security solutions were designed well before the advent of x86 virtualization, and so they don't even know they're operating in a virtual environment. It's kind of like the movie Matrix, where if you all watch that movie, there's Morpheus walks in to Neo and he offers him a blue pill and a red pill, right? And I don't remember which pill is which, but you take the right pill, you immediately know you're operating in a virtual environment. In fact, that argument holds true in the movie too, and you're able to react differently, right? And that's what security solutions in the market haven't taken. They've taken the other pill, and so they behave identical in a virtual environment as they would in a physical environment, which is what creates this problem. They are not virtualization aware, right? And so what happens is this type of resource contention and AV storms, brownouts. Very, very common, especially in VDI environments where you have not just 10 or 20 VMs per host, but 40, 60 VMs per host, even more. And this is not endemic just to full system scans. We've heard customers or prospects talk to us even with things like pattern updates, which happen multiple times a day, right? When the business is up, your mission-critical applications are running, your pattern update happens. It needs to happen, otherwise your security agents are not going to be appropriately prepared to tackle the threat environment. Yet, that type of operation, when it happens, when you need to push patterns out to each and every agent, and that agent doesn't understand it's in a virtual environment, it tends to bring down the performance of the system, right? So resource contention, big issue. And lastly, the last one I will touch on here, although the list of security challenges was large, is complexity of management, right? The need to have to deal with agents in an age of VM sprawl where the number of VMs are hosts. When people go from physical to virtual, they're just not taking everything that was physical and putting it in a VM, and that's the sum total of VMs is identical to the total number of physical servers you have. No, that's not true. People are adding more VMs because they now have an opportunity to isolate applications within VMs. Right? That's the beauty of virtualization, and that's what's contributing to this phenomenon that's called VM sprawl. Not a bad thing. But the challenge is having to put security agents on each one of those VMs it adds to operational burden. From having to provision and security agent on each one of these VMs, having to constantly over time reconfigure that, patch that agent, and roll out patterns to it becomes a challenge in terms of management complexity. Right, and you're rolling out patterns, 4, 5, 6 times a day. That adds up in terms of how many human hours is being invested from having to deal with that issue. So those are some of the challenges that impact security when deployed in the virtual environment. There are many others that I didn't touch on, but we don't have time to go into that at length here. The other area that I want to kind of bring us all onto the same page on is the evolving threat environment, which of course doesn't just impact the physical server environment. Everything that's a threat on the physical server is pretty much a threat on the virtual server as well. And as the threat environment has evolved, it's no longer college kids in dorm rooms anymore that are writing pieces of code to bring down Windows and become famous, overnight. No, this has now transformed itself into a multi-billion-dollar industry where the bad guys have a clear profit motive to create code that can sit on your servers or any other system where there's important data residing, and not declare the existence of that malware, right? So it can siphon off data over to the bad guys for their own personal use. So that's the nature of the threat environment that we're in. And it's much more sophisticated than what we're looking at, polymorphic environments where it's very much more, where the threats are no longer just attacking the operating system. It's all the way up the application stack. Everything that is software, unfortunately, is written by humans and is therefore susceptible to vulnerabilities. Anything that's a vulnerability can be exploited. Application-level attacks are now starting to become a key opportunity to exploit and end up and allow malware to then enter the VM. Right? Verizon puts out an annual data breach report, and in 2009 report, they basically showed that 79% of all records that were breached, that's 4 out of 5 records that were breached from the application level using SQL injection, cross-site scripting as an attack vector. That number from 4 out of 5 went to 9 out of 10 in 2010, so 90% from 79%. So it's an ever-growing, ever-important threat vector that we need to be cognizant of. Is running AV on just the VM sufficient? Right? The AV is not designed to catch web application level attacks. Right? So that's kind of the message I'm trying to drive towards. It's also not just more sophisticated, more frequent and more targeted as well. Right? John Halumka, CIO of Harvard Medical School, talks about how their systems are attacked every 7 seconds, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's if you're a big company with a big sign outside your window saying, your Enterprise Inc., you're leaving yourself vulnerable to attacks from the bad guys. They're also more targeted so that malware is really designed for you, your corporation.inc. Okay, so the challenge with the evolving threat environment, the message here is that if you deploy something, and I already alluded to this on this last slide, just providing something like core vanilla AV on the virtual machine and then something on the perimeter is simply not enough. The threats are much more sophisticated that they're able to subvert perimeter-based defenses and end up on the virtual machine. Right? Things like encrypted attacks, where the perimeter simply can't see the stream because it's encrypted, or mobility, where the machine ends up leaving the perimeter, going outside, and picking up malware and coming back in. Insider attacks, wireless networks, these are all contributing to the challenge for protecting something simply by deploying security on the perimeter. I'm not saying perimeter security is defunct and it needs to go away. No, certainly it's an important part of your defense strategy, but it's just one layer, and you need to tack on additional layers of security beyond that. The challenge also is that the threat environment has evolved where threats are much more rapid and fast-moving than it was several years ago. In 2003, you had 28 days from when the vulnerability was first announced to when until when an exploit came out. That window has constantly shrunk over the next few years. In 2006, it was already a zero-day attack. That is where we are now. In fact, we are now in the situation where, as you saw in the case of the Google Aurora attacks, the vulnerability was first exploited before the vulnerability was announced. Right? Microsoft admitted much to the same with that IE flaw that they announced after the fact. Right? So what does an organization do in terms of protecting themselves there? You are clearly vulnerable if you don't simply know about the vulnerability. You have no opportunity. There is no patch available because the vulnerability hasn't even been announced. How do you secure your application in that type of situation where the exploit's already out there? Again, is something on the perimeter in addition to AV on the host sufficient? That model won't. What I'm arguing for is that model doesn't work anymore. And I wanted to just highlight here that this is not limited to just the Windows operating system. While it may be a common infection point, that's not it. The vulnerabilities, as I said, go all the way up the stack. Anything that's an application on an enterprise application is something you need to protect for, and that includes your Oracle database, your any other application that's residing in your environment. How do you ensure that those applications are there vulnerabilities to that? Are you patching that? How do you take care of that? Right? And sometimes the application may not have a patch available for it, like an unsupported OS like Windows 2000 is not supported anymore, where patches will not be available from the vendor. This includes legacy web applications, where, as I said, that's the most common attack vector where the attacks are coming from, leveraging techniques like SQL injection attacks. And then there are some systems that simply patches are not available for at all. Right? All of these trends are relevant not just for physical servers, but are relevant on virtual servers too. As I said, everything that's a threat on the physical server is relevant here too, and something that we need to be cognizant of as we try and secure this virtual environment. So just a quick recap so that we're all on the same page on that. Now let's talk about what are the best practices, what are the technologies that are available to us in terms of securing this type of environment from both these trends, right? The security challenges that security solutions are faced with, are living with today because they were never designed for virtual and cloud environments, and then the threat environment that has also complicated the task of the security solution today. So the first key paradigm that we want to talk about, that I'm sure all of you are excited about, certainly everyone I've talked to thinks this is a cool new thing that VMware has innovated in, and companies like Trend Micro are able to leverage. And that's hypervisor-powered security architectures, and that's the vShield endpoint APIs. So leveraging the vShield endpoint APIs, what is the value proposition? You have the ability to deploy a virtual appliance, it's a security VM, that's focused on providing security tasks for the entire ESX or vSphere server. And there is no need to provide any security agents from Trend Micro or any other vendors anymore in terms of deploying antivirus or anti-malware software on those agents, right? So no changes to the VM needed, at least from a security vendor perspective. All you need is this virtual appliance that can secure the applications from the outside. So that's one of the new paradigms that, in fact, VMware announced yesterday, and Trend Micro also had a press release joint with that, where we talked about what Trend is doing in this particular space, leveraging those APIs in terms of solutions to offer that type of agentless anti-malware capability. So the opportunity with agentless anti-malware, what is it? So the fact is previous model was you needed to put an agent within each and every one of those VMs. Now using vShield endpoint, the value proposition is you have, as I said, one virtual appliance, no agents on the VMs required. The benefit is, number one, much more manageability than you had before. Where you had to roll out patterns to each and every one of those agents before, you had to reconfigure it, you had to patch it, you had to, in some cases, if it wasn't part of your template, even provision it. All of that goes away. But by a factor of n, where n is the number of agents, number of virtual machines that you might have on a typical server. Of course, that number is hugely more magnified, as I said, in virtual desktop deployments. Right? So the manageability is a very strong benefit, which all the ops guys in the room, which most of you are, or all everyone I've talked to certainly has been supremely excited about. The other benefit is faster performance in terms of freedom from our AV storms. Right? We essentially take the performance troughs out of the equation, where if this was the performance of your host server, every time an AV storm happened, it would dip, and then it would pick back up after those scheduled scans or pattern updates completed. You've taken all of those troughs away. Right? So we've removed the pain of AV storms from this equation, which, of course, allows you to maintain high levels of performance throughout. Security is stronger as well because you now have instant on protection, right? The moment a VM is up, a new VM emerges, it's instantly protected. Auto protection for the VMs. No need for an ops person, an administrator to go in and reconfigure your security application to get that agent on and reconfigure the security console to see that particular agent. All of that, again, goes away. So that instant protection is available on all particular new VMs that emerge in your environment. It's also available on existing VMs that may have been offline for long periods of time. The moment that particular virtual machine, which was dormant for maybe weeks or months, is reactivated again because there's no agent on there that was out of date, and it's being secured by the virtual appliance. You have instant protection. Right? You also have another model is you get a little bit more built-in tamper-proofing here because you've created isolation between the anti-malware security appliance and the malware that's resident on the machine, where previously they were on the same system. The actual scanning now happens from outside, which creates isolation and prevents the malware from actually trying to disrupt the performance of the virtual appliance. And then higher consolidation, where you have now, because you've removed some of the performance bottlenecks, and you have an opportunity to now increase your consolidation rates and put more virtual machines on that environment than you ever could before. Right? So those are the benefits. Now, this may have been a slide if you watched VMware's presentation yesterday on the same subject that you saw, and it's it's the same story, it's the same solution, so that's why it's the same slide. And the story is really that if you've got a virtual appliance here with an anti-malware scanning module built inside it, right? This is the guest VM that doesn't need an agent on there anymore. All it needs is a little driver component from VMware's side that allows the guest VM to communicate with the virtual appliance and send it pieces of information and all of the anti-malware operations, including on-access scans and on-demand scans. Right? Those are the two big security operations that an AV agent typically performs. Anytime a user opens a file, writes a file, that's an on-access scan specific to that file to make sure that file's good. Right? There's no malware on there. The second one is an on-demand scan. That is done at the scope of the entire disk to ensure that if our understanding of what's good or bad has changed, to make sure that we scan that disk with this new pattern file information to make sure something that we had bypassed before because our understanding of malware was a little out of date at that point, we make sure that full system scan will catch that. That's done on a periodic basis. Both of those operations can now be performed by the anti-malware scanning module, facilitated by the vShield endpoint library, also known as EPSec, right? So, and the other two pieces in there are, clearly if you find something bad, you got to clean it. You got to take some steps towards remediating it. You got to delete it. You got to quarantine it. All standard operations that an AV security solution can do can now be done by the appliance, facilitated by the EPSec APIs. And lastly, there's some caching and filtering capabilities built in here to improve the performance of that entire operation in terms of communication between the appliance and the guest VM that you're protecting, right? So the vShield endpoint APIs, that's vShield endpoint's the platform that facilitates this communication. Trend Micro and other security vendors, so far at this point it's a Trend Micro only solution, have the opportunity to provide a security virtual appliance to protect that VM from the outside. So it's, again, we're not competing with each other. It's really part of one solution. VMware provides the platform. Vendors like Trend Micro have the opportunity to provide a virtual appliance that can secure the VM from the outside, right, in this particular manner. Hopefully that was clear. And in terms of process flow, what happens is when a file is open, in this case, this is the case of an on-access scan, that file information is transmitted between the guest VM and the security virtual appliance. So we have a small packet of the file going over to the virtual appliance to make sure, is this good? Virtual appliance says, that's good. Now get me this particular packet within the file to make sure that what I just saw doesn't lead up to a specific piece of malware. The pattern I'm seeing here is not representative of these types of malware that I've seen. So other packets are subsequently sent over. And there is some caching built into the product to try and optimize that type of activity. And so by doing that, at the end, the virtual appliance spits out a good message, or I'm sorry, I didn't mean to click that, a good message or a bad message, and appropriate action can be taken in either case. So we've done some early test findings, and more detailed benchmark studies are forthcoming between Trend Micro and VMware in this space. But the early findings show that typical agent-based solutions, whether there's vendor B, vendor Y, or vendor R, these are real solutions, and you can make your own guesses who they are. And the agentless antivirus solution T, how do they compare, right? And we've taken out the y-axis on purpose. The data is real, but we want to come back to you with proper benchmark studies. But what we've seen is that the overall memory consumption, you have a key. So firstly, before we get into memory, do we have CPU savings? We think CPU is more or less a wash. Why? Because what was being performed in the agent before is now being performed in the virtual appliance. So you're not going to have CPU optimization, CPU consumption more or less the same. From a memory consumption standpoint, the savings can amount to quite a bit. As you add on in the conventional AV approach, more and more VMs, the memory that each agent requires, and that's anywhere from 100 to 150 MB. It's a big scan engine component and then an incremental pattern file component. And in an age of pattern file explosion, because malware has so many different variants, most common solutions in the market have pretty large pattern files these days. That memory that's required by each agent slowly adds up till it becomes a very big challenge that you have to deal with. Now, the agentless approach, from what we've seen, is more or less flat, where the appliance is doing all of the work here. So the memory consumption grows very, very gradually. For the most part, it's almost flat. Right? So that's one key area where you will see a benefit. And the other area is in the area of bandwidth consumption and time in terms of operations, right? So something like a signature update where you have to roll out a pattern. In this case, we did a study for 10 agents. The common solutions in the market will have to deploy that pattern update to each and every one of those 10 agents, whereas what you require with the agentless model, leveraging vShield endpoint, is just a pattern update to one of these solutions. So this is, as you can see, is much faster to complete and also takes much less consumption in terms of network bandwidth, right? And you could say that's a factor of about 1:10, because in this case we're looking at about 10 agents, right? So that's the other area where you will see significant savings. Even from an IOPS perspective, we believe that where you are having to do now in this model much less work, the pattern updates are not needing to go to each agent, and each agent isn't doing a write to disk. You're now consolidating that to one write operation. You will see benefits from an IOPS perspective as well with some of those types of operations. Okay, so at this point, hopefully the value proposition here is pretty clear about what is the power of this type of approach here, right? At Trend Micro, what we've done is we've really been looking at the pattern file type of challenge before and in many other ways before this type of innovation even opened itself to us, right? Where what we've got is in terms of investing in the cloud, Trend Micro has a technology called the Smart Protection Network, which allows us, even in an agent-based model, to reduce the agent footprint within each and every VM, or physical server for that matter, by deploying the patterns in the cloud so that what's in the VM is much lighter, right? And I think we're starting to see some of the other leaders in the security space trying to get on that type of bandwagon, saying the pattern file explosion is a big problem, and the only way we can deal with it is this type of approach, which is to have something in the cloud, in fact, the bulk of your pattern in the cloud, and cross-reference with that, so what's needed within the VM is a much lighter footprint, and also because the pattern file information is in the cloud, it's much more real-time rather than having to wait for what's in the agent in terms of footprint, right? So that's been one of the areas where we at Trend have clearly been looking at for a while. By leveraging this type of innovation that VMware has allowed us to exploit, we're able to extend that type of solution even further by using this. We're able to render completely agentless architectures where there's no pattern requirement on the VM at all, and what's on the appliance is a much lighter component because of this type of cloud client architecture. So firstly, the first paradigm there was to leverage vShield endpoint in terms of whatever security solution you have. Ensure that your vendor integrates these APIs in to allow you to benefit from this type of capability. Now, is that going to solve all of your challenges in terms of security in the virtual domain? Certainly not, because as I mentioned, just AV on the VM is not sufficient for you in terms of securing you from today's threat environment. What this type of solution does, that VMware and Trend Micro have been collaborating on, is reduce the manageability challenges, the performance challenges, and allowed you to have more instant protection, but it doesn't address the challenge that AV itself as a technology needs to be supplemented. You need more in terms of protection on your hosts in order to equip them from today's threat environment. And to do that, where VMware has innovated, already did in its last iteration, last VMworld, where I think was it even before that, the VMware announced VM Safe, right? These are a different set of APIs than vShield endpoint, but it allows vendors like Trend Micro to come in, integrate with VM Safe, and allow us to beef up the security on your servers without having to incur the cost of manageability, performance, etc., by having to deploy an agent on there in terms of advanced technology components. So what we now have the opportunity with VM Safe to do is a chance to beef up server security, to provide agentless firewall, IDS, IPS, web application protection that can protect all of these VMs again without requiring an agent on there, right? Clearly, what I argued for at the very beginning of this preso was that just having AV on the hosts, on the guests that is, and having something on the perimeter doesn't cut it in today's threat environment. What I'm proposing to you as a best practice is if you deploy additional technologies which you need on these guests and an ability to render that with VMsafe via a virtual appliance allows you to protect those virtual machines more comprehensively. And a number of security solutions are already in the market from Trend Micro, from other security vendors that provide that type of agentless protection for virtual machines. So, and I presume a lot of the people, because VMsafe has been around for a while now, are quite familiar with the different APIs. There's memory introspection APIs, network traffic introspection, and then storage APIs from VMsafe that allows us to sit on the outside and using the hypervisor get a window of visibility into what's inside the VM. So the solution that really benefits IDS IPS web application protection is the VMsafe network APIs, which allows us to deploy some protection within the virtual appliance in terms of deep packet inspection, and then have some of the capabilities, the core firewall type of capabilities deployed, actually performed within the hypervisor itself. Right, so this is how we work. We intermediate any traffic that's coming to a VM is forked off and inspected in the virtual appliance, and is then, if it's good, it is allowed to reach the VM. Right, so and VMsafe permits that, gives security solutions an opportunity to enable this type of virtual appliance. So to recap what I just said is agentless anti-malware leveraging vShield endpoint and the EPSec APIs. That's new paradigm number one, but that itself is not sufficient. Go beyond AV, use agentless capabilities powered by VMsafe to provide firewall, IDS, IPS type of capabilities as well. Agentless is this mantra in both those paradigms. But now, paradigm number 3, I'm arguing for virtualization-aware agents as well. There are scenarios where you will want to put agent-based security on top of agentless security as well, right? Those might be use cases, maybe offline desktops, right? When in a VDI deployment where you check out your VM and take it on a plane or elsewhere, beyond the sphere of influence of the virtual appliance. So that's a clear case where you will want an agent on there to ensure that if that particular VDI image is accessing the web, that and potentially leaving itself vulnerable to infection, that it can protect itself. Compliance may be another situation where you need to put additional technologies within the guests, things like integrity monitoring, log management, that will be important PCI requirements. And those types of capabilities today, even with VMsafe and vShield endpoint, you are not able to provide and deliver from within the virtual appliance. So there will always be situations like that where you will want an agent-based security for those types of applications that are running in those types of VMs. And lastly, defense in depth, where it would be great if you had virtual appliances and agents both within your data center environment, allowing you maximum flexibility where you can deploy your virtual appliance to protect most of your VMs, but some of your VMs that are more resource intensive you can choose to protect with agents on there, so that maximizes your performance and scalability, prevents the virtual appliance from becoming a performance bottleneck, if you will, because all of the traffic needs to be intermediated over there, right? So those are some use cases where you will want agents, and it's important then in all those cases where an agent resides within the VM that you pick a security solution, make sure that your vendor supports it, that it is virtualization aware. It needs to be tightly integrated with the vCenter infrastructure so that it doesn't create things like AV storms, right? It needs to have the, let me take a guess here, the red pill, if you will. And by consuming that, it is aware that it's operating in that virtual environment, right? So folks, a little question mark faces there I saw. I was referring to the Matrix story all over again, the Morpheus and Neo example. So that's paradigm number 3 that's important. And the last one that I will round out in the recommendations with is ensuring that all of this security is cloud ready as well. Because if you're in stage 1 and stage 2 today, you're going to want to go to stage 3, right? VMware has a set of APIs that permits you to do that today, that permits you to get more agile in terms of being able to respond to your business needs, and your security solution has to keep up with that transformation, right? If your security solution is not designed to operate in a cloud, then again, you're going to be held back, right? Is your application secure if you were to move it to the cloud? Is your data secure if you were to move it to the cloud? Well, if you were to leave the cloud, is your data still there? How do you ensure that your data actually left the cloud if you intended to leave the cloud, right? So those types of issues become important, and you need to ensure that your security solution really, as a 4th recommendation, is prepared to leap into the cloud with you. So now I'll just want to spend a few minutes on discussing what at Trend we've been doing. We are now officially the largest pure play security vendor there is in the market. I'm very happy to say that. Thank you, Intel. We've been, of course, even without that bit of good news, we've been focused in the security and virtualization space more so than any other vendor. I think at least amongst all the big large vendors in the security space go. Right, so we've invested in this space. We're one of the closest VMware partners in the security space. As you can see, we collaborated with VMware in terms of building these APIs, and concurrent with the release of vShield Endpoint, we have solutions that will exploit that. We now have in our flagship product, Trend Micro Deep Security, antivirus capabilities that can run in an agentless manner, right? Leveraging the vShield Endpoint capabilities that VMware just provided. The Trend Micro Deep Security product is really built to be a comprehensive data center security suite. It comes with a number of, wrong button there. I was clicking the wrong thing. There you go. Built with a number of security modules, comprising of anti-malware now, but also previously included firewall, intrusion detection prevention capabilities, web application protection capabilities, log inspection, integrity monitoring. All of that designed to secure your entire data center environment, whether that was a physical server or a virtual server or a cloud server, but not just servers, even virtual desktops and laptops as well. So what we now have is yet another module or technology component that we've added to this Swiss Army knife of protection suites in terms of anti-malware. Right, agentless anti-malware. It is really a Swiss Army knife because you can choose to open whichever blades you want in terms of deploying that protection. You just want the anti-malware capability in an agentless mechanism. You don't need to deploy the firewall and IDS IPS. Although, message that I've been driving towards today hopefully resonated, and you realize that we need to go beyond AV as an organization. The product comes with, as I said, multiple of these modules. What we call the deep packet inspection module comprises of the IDS IPS keys and the web application protection piece. There's a firewall, the log inspection and integrity monitoring piece already, and the new addition there to this equation is the antivirus piece. I won't go into at length and bore you with what each of these components do. If folks who have interest, I'm happy to explain that offline. But the protection is delivered both in the form of an agent, wherever an agent's needed. As I said, physical servers, obviously, and other platforms require agents. But for the VMware platform, the protection is flexibly deployable in terms of an agent or a virtual appliance. The new anti-malware capabilities that we've introduced is unique to the virtual appliance now. At this point, it's delivered only in the virtual appliance. We'll be adding agent-based capabilities separately in the product too, right? And what we at Trend Micro, we firmly believe in some of those best practices that I espoused earlier, right? The product comes with a virtual appliance that provides IDS, IPS firewall, AV capabilities, all of that, and there is protection built in the agent, and the agent and the virtual appliance are coordinated, right? So if an organization could choose to set up, as I was saying earlier, agents on some machines and then virtual appliance protecting the bulk of your VMs, and that coordination exists. If the VM were to get rolled back to some previous point in time where an agent didn't exist, the virtual appliance would step in and protect it. So there's that type of coordination which helps in your defense in depth. And there is hypervisor or vCenter integration built in to ensure that a new VM emerges, we're instantly informed about it, and we can auto-protect that new VM. Sure, absolutely. So what the beauty of the way we've licensed this is it's simple because it's exactly how you license vSphere today, which is per CPU socket, X units of vSphere that you would need X units of deep security. And I said it's a Swiss Army knife, so you can deploy those X units for just the AV module, or you can deploy it for the full bundle of suites that we have, or just any one of those other modules too. Yes, there is a way to get all 6 modules in one price, but if for folks that didn't want that and wanted piecemeal protection, that's available too. Yes, please. So was there a question? Please go ahead.
Do you have a role-based policy where you can have multiple teams managing like the firewall, the antivirus?
Yes, role-based administration is built into the product, absolutely. The other piece here within this slide, just so I don't want to stop the flow of questions, please keep them coming, but I just wanted to, the only thing here, I've already covered the value proposition here in terms of agentless, but one key thing I want to also highlight is the fact that we have integration with the Trend Micro Smart Protection Network. I think I touched on it earlier, I don't remember. What's in terms of pattern that's resident on the virtual appliance is much lighter because much of the pattern resides in the cloud now. The Smart Network Protection engine that Trend Micro has built leverages that, provides that type of capability. Were there any other questions, please? No. So the question was, if I have a virtual appliance and I use the virtual appliance, can I protect if I wanted agents on some of the VMs, do I need another product from Trend? I think that was the question. Did I get that right? Okay. So the answer is no. So the same product, it's one product, deep security, that's it comes with 2 components. The virtual appliance that can protect the VMs would also comes with agents, and you have full flexibility in terms of how many VMs you protect with the agent and how many VMs you protect with the virtual appliance, and you can mix and match, and you can change that over time. You can choose to deploy everything with the virtual appliance today and move that to agent. The one caveat is that the anti-malware capability in this release, we've only come with that protection in the virtual appliance. But in the next release of the product, we will have that in the agent too. All of the other modules are available in the agent though. Correct. Absolutely. So the question was, if I have physical servers, what do I do? The answer is yes. We recognize that most organizations have a mix of physical servers and virtual servers. So the intention is to protect those physical servers where you cannot deploy a virtual appliance or agentless type of protection with that agent. Correct. So Deep Security 7.0 is the product that has physical server agent-based protection and also virtual server protection in terms of IDS, IPS, firewall, web application protection. All of that's already commercially shipping. What we have now announced in conjunction with the announcement from VMware of vShield Endpoint is the agentless anti-malware component. We just exited beta. We will be releasing that in another, I think, in October. So not too far away from now. The great question. Is the virtual appliance something that's at a host level, cluster level, data center level? Its answer is at the host level. You need one virtual appliance per host. I think I'm getting a cue. I have 4 more minutes, or was that 4 more questions? I think 4 minutes is what she meant. Go ahead, please. Next. Yes.
So if the virtual appliance dies, is there an all open or all close policy that you set at that point?
Great question. And this would be actually a great question for VMware because, and we had a resource here that walked out. But there are, from what I understand, VMware has built in additional technologies in terms of the vShield Manager component that allows instant notification if this communication between the agent and the virtual appliance were to go away, and allows you to be immediately notified and take preventive action. You can also set up affinity groups so that if the appliance were to go away, you could vMotion off all your agents off to another ESX server where it would be protected. What was the question, Pari?
Can you run 2 agents on the same host?
Or? So not 2 virtual appliances on the same host. So
you cannot run 2 virtual appliances.
Yes, only one virtual appliance is needed, and that's all that will run on the same host. But vMotioning is so. By the way, you can't virtual appliance. You would set it up so that your virtual DRS will not vMotion your virtual appliance over to another system because that is already protected by a virtual appliance. But you have full freedom to obviously DRS to vMotion over any VMs, any other VMs, anywhere else. And they would, of course, our appliance will keep track of that and ensure that they are protected in its new location. Oh, please go ahead.
If you have network access control based upon trend going on in your network, would you need to have an agent on each machine, or would the trend access control report that it's being protected by the virtual appliance?
So if you had network access control based on trend, would you?
Based upon the presence of the trend antivirus, would it detect that it's being protected by the virtual appliance, or would you need to put an agent on each machine?
Let me punt that question over to Bill McGee, our VP of R&D.
If you have network access control based upon the presence of antivirus, right now it's being reported through the trend product. Yeah, exactly. Would you need to put the agent on the machine, or would the reporter report that it's being protected by the virtual appliance? Yeah. So in this case,
Bill, hang on just a moment. Bob, could you heat the mic up, please? Thank you.
This is so it's a separate product in that this is, as Harish said, it's Trend Micro Deep Security, and so in the agentless anti-malware configuration, currently you can't also then cut off network information flow. That is something that we're looking at, though, in terms of being able to restrict a virtual machine if malware has been identified on the machine.
Yes, please.
What kind of latency or overhead is in these agentless file schemes?
That's a great question. So, yes, there is a small amount of latency indeed because the file needs to go, or packets of the file need to go from the virtual machine, from the guest to the virtual appliance. But because there is a virtual appliance resident on each and every host, this is really just a memory space to memory space transaction, so it's very lightweight relative to the overall savings, which is why in terms of operational time, as you saw that slide, you still come out ahead.
Do you have a percentage?
I do not have a percentage. Once around GA timeframe, we're doing performance benchmarks. We'll hopefully have that data there.
Does it provide in-memory scanning?
No, in-memory scanning is not provided. Let me just confirm that. We'll absolutely, yeah. Just file, yes.
On access and disk, right?
So, for traditional who's scanning and all these activities, how are we going to do with this?
Correct. So the question was, can this replicate everything that a standard AV agent would do in terms of, if I may qualify the question, in terms of what is signature scanning, right? In terms of file-based signature scanning, everything that's done in terms of detection capabilities, in terms of remediation capabilities, all of that's available on the virtual appliance now.
So when you scan after the signature, when you perform a scan, you scan pretty much all the machines on a particular host, right?
So the question is this, so she's waving me down, she's going to throw us all out. But so let me take this question, maybe this is the last one, and if she leaves the room, maybe you can sneak in a few more. But the answer, the question was, is this applied to all the guests within a particular ESX host? Answer is yes. Okay, so I think that was the last question. I'm happy to stay here and answer more, but offline, I guess, since they're driving us out. Thank you so much for coming, guys.